All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys on a day of unbelievable allegations. Unfortunately, we do believe them. But look, let's have a conversation about all of them. So obviously, the Kavanaugh one, or in this case two, is the most relevant and important, and we will discuss that in a minute. And it's absolutely enormous in terms of the ramifications. But later on, more allegations against more political figures. I don't know if I believe them all. They're amazing, unbelievable, scandalous allegations, and they're devastating. And family members turning on one another.
There's a lot of that today.
There's a lot of that on the show today. I mean, red weddings abound. I did a YouTube live over the weekend on the poll numbers for the Republicans. Oh, wow, that is devastating. And partly relates to the first story that we're going to do. And the list goes on and on. So it's a hell of a show today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Obviously, if you miss any part of it for any reason, if you become a member, you can get it anytime you want. tyt.com/join. All right, Anna, let's do it.
All right. Over the weekend, The New Yorker, with reporting from Ronan Farrow, broke a story indicating that a second woman has come forward with allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. So these allegations are by a woman named Deborah Ramirez, and she went to Yale with Brett Kavanaugh, and she admits that, the alleged assault took place a long time ago, and so there are parts that she doesn't clearly remember. However, what she did relay to the reporters in this case, she says she does remember, and we'll see if these claims get investigated. But let me give you the details. So Deborah Ramirez remembers that Kavanaugh had exposed himself at a drunken dormitory party, thrust his penis in her face, and caused her to touch it without her consent as she pushed him away. She was quoted in the story as saying, "I wasn't going to touch a penis until I was married. I was embarrassed and ashamed and humiliated." Brett was laughing. "I can still see his face and his lips coming forward," or his hips, I apologize, "and his hips coming forward like when you pull up your pants." And so she says that she never came forward or told anyone about this because she was embarrassed. She was also drinking, so she was concerned that people would go after her rather than look into these allegations. And it seems as though those who support Kavanaugh today are using that against her, and we'll get to the reactions later. The claim dates to the 1983-1984 academic school year when Kavanaugh was a freshman at Yale University. The offices of at least 4 Democratic senators have received information about the allegation, and at least 2 have begun investigating it. So the New Yorker notes that the Senate had known about this, at least the Judiciary Committee had known about this last week. And the reaction from Republicans was to rush the confirmation. And that explains why all of a sudden there was this ultimatum indicating that there was a very strict deadline for Dr. Blasey to agree to testify. They later, changed that ultimatum, and now it's being reported that Dr. Blasey is likely to testify on Thursday of this week. However, with these new allegations, Senator Dianne Feinstein is calling for a postponement for that hearing in order to do further investigation, and they're also calling for the FBI to get involved.
So if the hearings do happen on Thursday, we will cover it live and give you commentary on the spot as we're showing it to you guys on tyt.com/live. And now let's get to the heart of the Ramirez allegations here. If true and can be shown well enough for people to understand that it is true, obviously would be the end of Kavanaugh. And now there are some progressive groups that are actually calling for him to be impeached from his current position on the federal bench. Now, she clearly says that she had trouble recollecting some of this and that she was very intoxicated that night. So that to me cuts in 2 different directions. One is that, well, okay, then you have to be a little wary about what she's saying because she's not entirely positive. On the other hand, which person who's looking to set him up politically would admit that? If you were trying to do a hatchet job, you would never say that. You would say, I'm positive and come forward yourself, et cetera. So now the second part of the question of whether you believe her or not, and look, these are the things that we all look to as we read these stories. And for example, look, even before I get to that, let me just say, if the story isn't true, that and Kavanaugh got blocked on that basis, that would be really, really troubling. It would be devastating. And it would be devastating because there was an injustice done to one person. It'd also be devastating to the cause of protecting women, because then it would give people carte blanche to say, oh, we knew all of it wasn't true, et cetera. So that's why it's really important for us, to the best of our abilities, to discern, is it true, is it not true, is it relevant, et cetera, right? So then that gets to the witnesses. So Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer broke this story. They're immaculately careful with these stories. That doesn't mean they get everyone right. But they did take a lot of care and have defended themselves about this particular story to try to reach out to all the different witnesses. Now, again, this is what the FBI should be doing, so we could all have a better sense of it, whether he did do it or didn't do it, so we can make clear decisions. But now reporters are chasing it down. New York Times, and all of a sudden, the Trump administration's best friend, and I don't say that derisively towards the New York Times, I say it towards the Trump administration, because the New York Times is just simply trying to report out a story, say that they talked to about a dozen people who did not recollect this at all. And so now the Trump administration doesn't think they're the failing New York Times. They think that they're the brilliant New York Times and are spreading that to everyone who will consider it. Farrow and Mayer at the New Yorker said, yes, we also talked to dozens of witnesses, and a lot of them did not remember this story, including a really good friend of Deborah Ramirez. On the other hand, several people did remember this story.
That's right. And by the way, there was one individual quoted in the New Yorker, someone who identified as a close friend, former close friend of Ramirez's, and said, we were close for 10 years and she never brought this up. First, let me just be clear about something. Just because someone didn't bring up a sexual assault doesn't mean it didn't happen. It could be something that this individual was very embarrassed about, just didn't feel comfortable opening up about. So let's just take that into consideration. But another thing to take into consideration is that that friend who was close with her for 10 years is now married to a man who was allegedly present when this alleged sexual assault took place. So there's a possibility that that person wants to protect her husband. Again, this is all analysis that's being done by me, by other people in the media, and the fact of the matter is it's all irrelevant. What matters is having a nonpartisan FBI investigation into this to get to the heart of the truth. But that is something that Republicans do not want to do. In fact, when they heard these allegations, they wanted to rush the confirmation of Kavanaugh. And they do not want the FBI investigation. I'm inclined to believe the accusations, right? And I'm starting to think that Republicans in the Senate are inclined to believe the accusations because they refuse any investigation into these allegations.
On this allegation, to me, there are a couple of things that go in different directions. And so everybody gets to make up their own mind, and obviously a lot of people come into it with their own biases, and I hope that some don't. And I hope that I'm one of the people who don't come at it with a bias, because I always think, what if it was a Democrat or a liberal appointee and this was happening? Okay, so that leads me to one person who does remember this incident. It is an unnamed person, but Mayer and the Trump propaganda on the fake news media is ridiculous. Mayer and Farrow aren't going to make up someone and call them an anonymous source. The reason Trump believes that could happen is because he used to do it. He would pretend to be someone else, John Miller, John Barron, and be an anonymous source for people. So he thinks, well, everybody's probably a serial pathological liar like myself. So my jury's in on Trump. That's not the issue here. So on this, a classmate actually did talk to Mayer and Farrow, and this is what he had to say. Here is the New Yorker quote. A classmate of Ramirez's said that another student told him about the incident either on the night of the party or in the next day or two. The classmate said that he is, quote, 100% sure that he was told at the time that Kavanaugh was the student who exposed himself to Ramirez. Well, that's number one, pretty clear. Again, it's just one witness, but Farrow and Mayer say that he independently recalled many of the same details offered by Ramirez. They did not coordinate, so these reporters are great reporters. They said, okay, what do you remember being the details? And that person had the same details that Ramirez had in her story, and that person apparently added, quote, "I've known this all along. It's been on my mind all these years. When his name came up, it was a big deal." So the only thing that where I go on the other hand is that she says she had trouble remembering. That's tough. That's a tough thing to say. Hey, there's a super serious accusation against someone at a pivotal time, and you're telling me you had to take 6 days to remember it exactly right. I get where a lot of people will go, bah, no, I'm out. That's not good enough, right? But it is independently confirmed by this other person, and she has apparently a reputation for it by even the people who say I don't remember that story. Say, oh no, Deborah Ramirez is super honest, like known for being over the top honest, and she shows it by saying I was drunk and I had trouble remembering. No political hack would ever say that if their job was to go get Kavanaugh. So she's not a political hack, that I'm certain of in that sense. She might be a Democrat, but this is not a hatchet job that she invented. Is she remembering right? I think that's a legitimate question, and then you have this evidence to help you make up your mind on that.
For me, what also happens to be pretty telling is her willingness to come forward with these allegations in a pretty honest way, meaning that she's admitting to, things that maybe she doesn't remember, admitting to the fact that she was drunk at the time. But more importantly, the fact that she's willing to come forward knowing the way that Dr. Blasie's been treated, the fact that she's had to move out of her home, she's had to relocate her family, and she has to hire private security because the threats against her have been terrifying. And she's also seen the way that Dr. Blasie's been dragged through the mud by Republicans. And the fact that she's willing to put herself out there with these allegations, it doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it's something to consider. And again, the most important thing to do is to conduct an investigation. And that, again, is something that Republicans do not want to do.
And understand the politics of this too, which is that, yes, the Republicans don't want to do the investigation because they're afraid it's going to get past the midterm elections, then they might lose the Senate, and then it might not get Kavanaugh confirmed. The Democrats, for the same reason, do want the investigation, partly to find out the truth, but partly to delay the proceedings. That is a real political concern of the Democrats, so I'll take that into account as well. For me, I think, man, if it isn't true and you buried this guy and you didn't do an FBI investigation, or you put him on the court and it wasn't true and we never find out, that still is terrible for him because forever a huge percentage of this country is going to think that he did it. And if it isn't true, I would want, if it was me, I'd be like, my God, get in there, talk to, here's my witness one, witness two. Look, and nobody's recollection is perfect from 36 years ago, et cetera, but I gotta get this off my name, right?
Absolutely. I know that if I were dealing with false accusations, I would 100% want someone to investigate it to ensure that my name gets cleared. And it's just strange that he doesn't want that. Kavanaugh, for his part, has responded by saying, I won't be intimidated, I won't withdraw as a nominee for the Supreme Court. And so he continues to deny the allegations. He wants to keep moving forward with the hearings and get confirmed. But let's say best case scenario for him, he does get confirmed without any investigation. Is he comfortable knowing that there's a huge portion of the country that either doesn't know what the truth is, they're kind of, on the fence, or are convinced that he is someone who's committed sexual assault? This is a serious thing. By the way, attempted rape is a serious crime, and we're not calling for a criminal investigation, but I don't think that anyone who has committed any type of serious crime should ever make it into our justice system, but more importantly, in the highest court in the country.
Yeah, and one more, some degree of strike against him. You weigh it again at whatever you think is appropriate. He said that these charges by Ramirez were, quote, smears, pure and simple. So he's now super aggressively fighting back. Now, if you thought they were smears, I would fight back super aggressively, and you probably would too. But as I read Ramirez's story, I thought, no, this definitely happened to her. I'm not 100% sure that it was Brett Kavanaugh, but she didn't make up the whole story, and she's not doing it for political reasons. Otherwise, she wouldn't, do all the things that I described here, and she wouldn't be hesitant. And by the way, another thing you should know, and this cuts in two directions as well. The Democrats apparently went fishing here, trying to find someone because they had heard of a story at Yale where Kavanaugh had done this. Number one, that apparently exists. Enough people have heard about it that the Democrats found out about it. Number two, they then went and tried to find who it happened to. And through that process, Ramirez gets revealed. So that is a strike, that is a thing in her favor, because she didn't come out here and go, it was me, I'm doing it. That Kavanaugh, I don't want him on the court. She's not doing any of that. She got dragged into it. You want to count it as a strike against the Democratic Party for going fishing and finding this person? Okay, fine. And that seems like that's what happened. But the question is it true? If I'm Kavanaugh and I read this story, of course you're going to get mad if it wasn't you. You're going to be super mad, right? But at the same time, I'd read it and go, she definitely thinks it happened to her, okay? So then the question is, who was it? Because I didn't do it. And I'm not sure I'd go out there and say, this is a smear through and through. I said, look, man, that's a terrible thing for that to happen to her. And maybe we should look into figuring out who did it, because it definitely wasn't me.
Yeah.
Unless he just thinks, nah, she's just a super, super clever liar, and this was a political trick all along. But this fact pattern doesn't seem to match that.
Right. Again, there should be the FBI involved in this. They should look into it and try to figure out whether or not there's any corroborating evidence, whether or not any of these allegations are true. It's ridiculous that it's now up to people in the media to do the investigation and figure out what the truth is. By the way, one other thing I wanted to bring up. Last week, we played a video featuring Senator Mazie Hirono, and she had asked Brett Kavanaugh, have you ever been accused of, I don't remember the exact wording, but she asked if he ever was accused of sexual assault as an adult. And I thought that was weird wording, right? And now I'm realizing, it probably had to do with these allegations, because remember, these allegations are from when he was a freshman at Yale, when he was an adult. The allegations that Dr. Blasey brought forward happened when they were in high school, when he was 17. And so who knows, like what's happening behind the scenes. You're right, it does seem like Democrats are on a fishing expedition trying to find more accusers, but nonetheless, I don't want this to be a guessing game. I want this to be something that's looked into by nonpartisan professionals. And
the exact question was, have you committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature? And that was in context of when he was an adult. And so at the Yale incident, he would have been an adult, and it certainly would have qualified as that. And he said no, that he had not. So one super last thing on this is that, look, Kavanaugh has now been caught saying several things that didn't prove to be true. So that context is also relevant. And so now in the context of a guy who's swearing up and down that certain things are the case, and it turns out they're not the case, now you have this situation, well, it makes him less credible. And obviously every new accuser makes him even less credible, and both sides know that, and hence why the Democrats want to see if there are more accusers, and now Michael Avenatti is talking about he has another one, and the Republicans think we got to get this thing done right now, so that there are no more accusers, and he's on the court. I don't care if he did it or didn't do it. Which way is he voting? He's voting with corporations. He's voting against Roe versus Wade. He's in. Go, go, go. And that appears to be the case, except for one caveat. Unless they think it's going to cost them the election, because the thing that any politician cares most about is their own seat, and so that's the calculations being played out this week. And actually, one super duper last thing is that in the post game today, I want to talk about the context of Georgetown Prep, where Kavanaugh came from, and how they would apparently target one woman at a time and try to get them intoxicated. and they called it and the thing that they concocted was jungle juice, etc. But I want to talk about that. It's even separate from this story. Obviously, it's related to this story, but that concept of guys trying to do that, it just merits a further discussion. Let's do it in the post game. You get that by being a member at tyt.com/join.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will discuss reaction to this story by both Trump officials, Trump himself included, and also Trump's base. Emma Vigeland was at a Trump rally in Springfield, Missouri, and they had some fascinating things to say about Dr. Blasie's allegations.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. Member comments first. Paul says, there's a big difference between investigations done by reporters, the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the FBI background check. FBI is best option to get to the truth. If you believe they are nonpartisan, as we do right now, at this point in history, then you should want the FBI. Now, of course, Trump hates the FBI, so that's another factor because they're investigating him.
Well, he hates the truth.
Yeah. Fort Costa Rica writes in, it's simple. If you're innocent, you want the investigation. If guilty, you make excuses not to. Smooth writes in, leave it to Trump to pick a judge who can't get confirmed in what would have usually been an easy vote in the Senate. Now this makes me wonder the atmosphere Justice Kennedy fostered. Oh, that's an interesting comment too. And he clerked for Justice Anthony Kennedy, who insisted that Kavanaugh be picked, apparently, according to some allegations. Okay, and then I'm gonna go to Twitter for two more. Gabby Marita writes in there, are the new allegations really that unbelievable? At this point, they seem very much par for the course. Gabby, I hear you on that. I was actually referring to later stories on other allegations. And you will get to those in a little bit. And Joe Oliver 44 says, think about the party that would march through hell to get a rapist on the SCOTUS because he'd make it so that rape victims would have to have their rapist baby. Now, look, I think it's too over the top to call him a rapist because that has not been proven.
Or even alleged so far.
Yeah, alleged attempted rape is the heaviest of the charges. But the second half of your tweet is unfortunately a very, very good point. I mean, here we have a guy who is apparently against Roe versus Wade. So if you're raped, sorry, you're gonna have to have the rapist baby. So, I mean, that is so deeply disconcerting to begin with, but the Republicans view that as, yeah, that's no problem. I don't see why that's an issue, right? So the fact that we have to start the conversation there is so terrible. When you add in the alleged attempted rape, it does make it even more problematic. Okay. We are doing the membership drive. I wanted to check in on that and then give you guys an exciting story about that in a sec. So let's just look at our thermometer. We started at 27,661 after Labor Day. Let's see where we are today. 31,905. Now that would be great to get to 32,000 by the end of today.
Yes.
That would be wonderful. tyt.com/join to support progressive media. Your home of progressives here on the Young Turks. Speaking of which, Aggressive Progressive, one of our shows, has a very important exclusive tomorrow. So make sure that you are checking that out. It is at live at 3 p.m. Eastern at tyt.com/members live, because you have to be a member to get Aggressive Progressive live. But if you are, and some of the members already know who it's referring to because they get notices ahead of time and they're super excited about it. But for everybody, sign up now. Don't miss that exclusive interview with someone I think that you guys are all fans of with an important announcement. So tyt.com/join to become a member and then watch Aggressive Progressive tomorrow live at 3 p.m. Eastern for that exclusive. All right, Anna, what's next?
There are now 2 women who have accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct, and Michael Avenatti, the attorney for Stormy Daniels, has come forward alleging that there is a 3rd woman who has credible claims against Brett Kavanaugh as well. So we don't know what those accusations are. Avenatti hasn't released any details about those accusations yet, but it appears that he will be representing this woman. And again, he says that the allegations are credible. Now, with that said, I think an interesting conversation would be the political calculations / miscalculations by Republicans in regard to this story. There has been some polling recently indicating that Republicans are losing support among female voters. And so weird slip. Cenk has more details on that. I don't know where that came from.
I have strong details. I have the best details. Maybe that's where it came from.
Yes, you do have details.
Okay, so before I get to the political calculations here, which are affected by if there is a third woman, Avenatti on Twitter has been talking about this since Sunday night. We're doing the show live here, of course, Monday night. He says his client is no longer a government employee, but that she still holds a security clearance. So that is relevant. It makes you wonder if she worked with Kavanaugh at some point in the Bush administration or when he was a judge. He says that she's had multiple security clearances. Now, there's no way of judging whether that person exists and how credible they are or what any of the details or the allegations are because they're not public yet. Now, Avenatti, as a person, cuts in two different directions. Clearly, he's against Trump, so you can take what he says with some grain of salt. On the other hand, when he has promised big scoops in the past, he has always delivered. There has not been like, hey, I'm going to do this. Just kidding. I was just trying to get media attention. That has not happened yet. So if he says there's something coming out, it doesn't mean it's going to be credible, but there probably is going to be something. So that would be a third person. So now as the Republicans look at that, here is the calculation they're making. Okay, if we think we're going to lose the majority in the Senate, then we have to get Kavanaugh through right now. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get him through if the Democrats control the Senate after the elections. On the other hand, if we can hold a majority, who cares about Kavanaugh? Let's just get rid of him. Let's get someone else that is not going to inflict political damage on us right before the election, especially with female voters. So that is what they're weighing right now. And how much damage is it going to do the Republicans if they keep this national conversation going where they're constantly attacking women who are making serious allegations and saying, oh, they're lying, they're smears, they're this, they're that. So now factor in the poll that Anna mentioned. It came out over the weekend, and I was so blown away by the numbers that I did a YouTube live on it. And so the generic congressional elections, Democrats versus Republicans, who do you want to control Congress, was at already an incredibly high 8-point advantage for the Democrats until this poll. This poll now has it at a 12-point advantage.
Whoa.
And there's only 6 weeks left. So tick, 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 tick. Now, the only demographic that the Republicans are still holding is men over the age of 45. They have lost every other demographic. And now, because their lead among men over the age of 45 is strong enough, they're still holding men overall, but now that lead among men is just down to 3 points, which is really bad news for Republicans. They have to hold men at much higher numbers in order to win these elections. Now, how about women? They've always had a disadvantage when it came to women, and to me, when the Democrats and MSNBC always touted, oh, they lost women, I was like, yeah, but they have men. Wait, you're just telling half the story. That doesn't make any sense. So, well, now in this case, I just told you the other half of the equation, men. When it comes to women, the lead that the Democrats have now is no longer big or significant. It is now gigantic. The Democrats now hold a 25-point advantage among women. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to do that math. Only a 3-point lead with men and a 25-point deficit among women. And women have been showing up in record numbers in the primaries. And that's just within the party. Okay, wait till you get a load of the general election. Now, the last stat that has got to get Mitch McConnell and his colleagues super nervous, which whether it's the right thing or not the right thing, is probably going to affect Kavanaugh's fate more than anything else, is even in Republican districts, their lead among compared to the Democrats on average for the whole country is down to 1 point. Now, understand that a lot of those Republican districts are super safe. They have 20-point leads, 30-point leads in some of those districts. So if you take all the Republican-held districts on an average, they're down to a 1-point lead against the Democrats. That's not a wave, that's a tsunami. So a Republican pollster said, I have never seen numbers this week. So as they get together in caucus this week, which is exactly what they're doing, I need you to understand that they're gonna keep it real. That McConnell's gonna talk to those guys. How many of you do you think are gonna lose? Ted, do you think you're gonna lose in Texas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how many, hey, are you going to lose in Missouri? Are we gonna get McCaskill back into the Senate, right? So what do we need to do? I mean, are we gonna go from 25-point deficit with women down to 30 points? Then we're all toast. We might all lose, right? So that's what's happening right now.
I have so many things to say. Okay, so first off, when it comes to Republicans losing support, I do think that the Kavanaugh hearings have a lot to do with it, but also I think Republicans have really underestimated how disastrous Trump's administration has been for their poll numbers, because they've continuously supported him, and it appeared, especially when it came to the election with Mark Sanford. Remember, Mark Sanford was one of the lawmakers who decided to criticize Trump, and he lost the election as a result of that. And I think that there was too much emphasis and too much attention paid to that, where Republicans thought, no, we better fall in line, we better support Trump, because if we do, we're gonna pay the price. But I do think that there were a lot of moderate Republican voters who ended up reluctantly voting for Trump, but then later saw, you know, how disastrous his policies were. Like the tax policy, it had very low approval ratings from the get-go, right? Before it even got passed. And Republicans passed it anyway, and they didn't care. They didn't think that they would have to suffer the consequences for that. And I do think that they will. And I think that this Kavanaugh thing, this Kavanaugh story is just another example, or maybe the straw that breaks the camel's back. We'll see. But going back to Ted Cruz, yeah. Ted Cruz is in trouble, and I think that Senate Republicans see that. There's a really good chance that Cruz could lose to Beto O'Rourke, and what makes that abundantly clear to me is the way that Cruz tries to attack Beto. He can't attack him based on policies because Beto's policies are popular, so instead he attacks Beto for having nice hair and good teeth. He attacks.
That is literally the weakest attack I have ever seen in politics.
I mean, is it really an attack though? I mean,
like, hey, you know what? You're too good looking. Hey, attack me like that all day long.
Yeah.
Okay, but I guess if you're Ted Cruz, you can't help but think that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so now my final thought on this is, look, do I think taking into account Kavanaugh's potential vote on Roe versus Wade, and then that impact on the elections and your electoral chances as a senator is a legitimate way to think about whether you should vote for Kavanaugh? Yes, I do think that. Do I think that taking your electoral chances into account is a legitimate way of deciding Kavanaugh at this point is the right way to go? No, I do not think that. I think that they should make that decision at this point based on whether they think he did or did not do those incredibly serious allegations. So I don't think politics should play into that, because those allegations are either obviously disqualifying if he did do it, or you should go to bat for him and defend him to the hilt if you think for sure that he didn't do it, because that's an unbelievable smear job if you think he didn't do it and you say, I don't care that he got smeared. Like, I'd lose my political career over defending a person that I thought was being smeared. But these are politicians. They're not like you and I, right? The only thing they care about is their own seat. So as they look at these events that are unfolding, man, they all have to be super, super nervous about it, because my God, when you have women showing up at the primaries at the record rate that they are, you got a 25-point deficit with women. Now imagine that you rush this confirmation through, and Avenatti's right, and there's a third person, and they're credible. Now you got women wondering, my God, what the hell has Kavanaugh been doing all his life? Then you got the story we didn't even do because we thought it was, not to the level of these other stories about how he needed a certain look for women who were applying, et cetera. I don't want to get into too much of those details, but when you put all of that into consideration, and then you go, yeah, all these horrible, horrible charges. We don't care, women. The only thing we care about is that he's going to vote against Roe versus Wade. I mean, you might have awoken a giant that you're not going to know what to do with. And so if you wanted record turnout like we've never seen for women voters, that is the exact recipe for that. So if they're not caucusing right now to be incredibly careful about their political chances, they ought to be, because they might be walking into something that they literally have never seen before in their political lives.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the reaction to the latest allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, because I think those reactions give you a sense of some of these lawmakers' priorities. So let's get to that. Following allegations from a second woman indicating that Brett Kavanaugh may have sexually assaulted a Yale student by the name of Deborah Ramirez, a number of people who are aligned with Trump and Trump himself have come forward denying the accusation, saying that they still support Kavanaugh and that this is nothing more than a smear campaign. So before we get to the Conways and the Lindsey Grahams of the world, let's go to Donald Trump. He wanted to address these allegations made by Deborah Ramirez, and here's what he had to say.
Mr. President, people just have concerns about these.
He's a fine man with an unblemished past, and these are highly unsubstantiated statements from people represented by lawyers. You should look into the lawyers doing the representation. I think it could be, there's a chance that this could be one of the single most unfair, unjust things to happen to a candidate for anything. For people to come out of the woodwork from 36 years ago and 30 years ago and never mention it, all of a sudden it happens. In my opinion, it's totally political. It is totally political.
A good way to figure out whether this is a smear campaign and whether this is purely political and whether this is unfair and unjust is to call for the FBI to do an independent investigation. This would be a background check, a more thorough background check, to see if any of these allegations might be true. But Donald Trump and Senate Republicans do not want that investigation to take place. So.
Yeah, the bar for Trump is so low now that whenever I watch a Trump clip and he doesn't say that water is tremendously wet, I feel like, oh, hey, he got through an answer without totally humiliating himself. Now, in this case, he's now actively decided that he's going to attack the people who might be victims of Kavanaugh, and he's decided, no, I'm all in. I'm going to call it all political. That they're made up. That they're totally made up, and that the Democrats worked with the lawyers for these women to make them up. I don't think that's a fruitful strategy, but that's super obvious. When was the last time Donald Trump had a productive strategy?
If right, exactly. So Kellyanne Conway was on CBS this morning, and she also addressed the latest accusations. Here's what she had to say.
Why does it not matter to anyone that Judge Kavanaugh has said unequivocally and categorically these allegations are false? He thinks the latest ones show a pattern of a smear campaign against him. And he has said from the beginning that he wasn't at the party in question 36 years ago in Maryland. All of that has to matter. But this president wants them both to testify, and the Senate Judiciary Committee has set up a process where they both can. I just don't think one man's shoulders should bear decades of the Me Too movement.
What does that even mean, that one man's shoulders should bear decades of the Me Too movement? No, like, he's being accused by two specific people at the moment. There could be a third based on what Michael Avenatti says. And by the way, let me just correct myself. She was addressing Dr. Blasie's allegations in that clip. And so, look, so her argument is, well, he says he wasn't at the party, so that means something. But it's he said, she said. Like, that's why you need to have an FBI investigation. And that's exactly what Republicans want. Lindsey Graham, talked about the hearing with Dr. Blasey, which is at the moment scheduled for Thursday. And he was asked if there are going to be any other people involved. Are there going to be any witnesses, anyone else speaking other than Brett Kavanaugh and Dr. Blasey? And he said no, that all you need to do is hear from those two. But then if you do that, again, it's a he said, she said situation. They don't want any corroborating evidence. It's crazy.
Yeah, so The general principles she lays out are perfectly fine, but when you, in this context, it makes no sense. So what do I mean by that? So if you said Charlie Rose shouldn't have to bear a whole Me Too movement on his shoulders, he's not. He's just being judged based on what he did. So nobody's judging Charlie Rose on what Harvey Weinstein did or what Roger Ailes or Bill O'Reilly did. They're just saying, Charlie, what you did was bad enough that you got to go, right? Now, if you said, hey, Aziz Ansari should not be judged for the actions of everyone else, you should just judge him based on what he did, well, we would agree to that too. And different people come out differently on that issue, but that's more of an open question and one that can be and has been debated, right? Then you're right to say, well, you can't put Weinstein on Aziz, 100% right. But nobody's putting Weinstein on Charlie Rose or on Brett Kavanaugh. They're all judged on the merits of their particular situation. If you said to me, Kavanaugh didn't do these things, but Weinstein and O'Reilly did, I'd be like, and why would I care what Weinstein and O'Reilly did in this context? You just told me the guy didn't do it. So of course he doesn't bear the burden of what other people did. So it's a straw man argument, okay? And then when she says, well, his point of view should also be taken into account. I don't know, I'm sure that there are people who don't take his point of view into account, but we do.
Right.
That's why it's not like we came out and we're like, we're positive. Okay, it's over. Ramirez is definitely right. Dr. Blasey Ford is credible, but not just credible, she's 100% right, and I don't care what he says. I don't think anybody reasonable is saying that. We're saying, yeah, that's why it's hard to figure out. He says it didn't happen. They have a credible case that it did happen. That's why we'd like to find out more.
Well, there is one specific person, a senator, who does not care what Dr. Blasey has to say. And this is the point that I was trying to make when the whole debate happened regarding whether or not Dr. Blasey should testify if the Republicans refuse the FBI investigation. I argued that these senators, Republican senators, have already made up their mind. They don't care what she has to say while she testifies. And guess who proved that point for me? Senator Lindsey Graham. So I'm gonna skip ahead to video 4. Here is Lindsey Graham arguing that, doesn't matter what she has to say, I've made up my mind.
I want to listen to her, but I'm being honest with you and everybody else. What do you expect me to do? You can't bring it in a criminal court. You would never sue civilly. You couldn't even get a warrant. What am I supposed to do? Go ahead and ruin this guy's life based on an accusation. I don't know when it happened. I don't know where it happened. And everybody named in regard to being there said it didn't happen. I'm just being honest. Unless there's something more, no, I'm not going to ruin Judge Kavanaugh's life over this.
Okay, so he also said that based on what's been agreed to on Thursday for the Thursday hearing, it will just be Brett Kavanaugh testifying and Dr. Blasey testifying. Things could change, things are constantly changing. There are new allegations by another woman. And so Democrats are saying we need to postpone this and have an FBI investigation. But just to quickly answer Lindsey Graham's question, what do you want me to do? Here's what I want you to do. Here's what a lot of people want you to do. Have the FBI investigate this, do a thorough background check. He brought up, the statute of limitations is over, you can't have a criminal investigation. No one's asking for a criminal investigation. He even brought up a civil lawsuit. No one's asking for a civil lawsuit. We're asking for the FBI to get involved so we can have an independent organization try to determine who's telling the truth here.
And even barring that, the least you could do is to listen to the hearings with an open mind.
He's not interested in that.
Again, if it was a Democratic appointment or a Republican appointment and I was a senator on that committee, I would definitely want to hear both sides of the story. Because if it leads me to believe that he didn't do it, I'd be doubly pissed. If it leads me to believe that he did do it, then would I change my mind? Yes, of course I would change my mind. But here's a sitting United States senator going, I don't care. There's nothing she can say that makes you believe that?
Well, he
There's
doesn't want to
nothing he
ruin
could
his
say.
life. He doesn't want to ruin Kavanaugh's life by listening to that testimony and actually, being unbiased in this case.
If you thought, after listening to it, you thought, no, these allegations are not credible and I don't want to ruin the guy's life, okay. But before listening to it, saying I've already made up my mind, well, first of all, it's not the right thing to do. Second of all, it's also not a very savvy thing to say. If you were a little bit smarter, you would play politics better than this, and you go, oh yeah, I got a total open mind. My God, my voters, you should understand what kind of an open mind I have. Then listen to it and then go, oh, well, golly gee, man, it turns out he's right and she's wrong. Right? But now they're so brazen, they don't even care to lie anymore. They're like, no, I'm biased. I don't give a damn what anybody thinks. Hey, my Republican base, remember how biased I am in favor of the man and never the woman, okay, just so you know, and the conservative and never the progressive, and never anything else. It doesn't matter. I'm always going to be biased in favor of my team. Well, he probably thinks politically maybe that does help him because Republican voters don't care anymore. That they do want you to be biased and they don't care about the facts. Actually, now that I've put it like that, there is an argument to be made that Republican voters don't care about facts anymore, so this might appeal to them.
Well, we actually have some evidence of that, and when we come back from our break, we are going to hear from the actual voters. These are Trump voters who attended a Trump rally in Springfield, Missouri. So come right back, we'll show you those clips and more.